So, hi everybody. Thanks for joining us. So, I'll introduce myself. I'm Faith Ishihara from the computer science team, and I'll let everybody else introduce themselves. So, next would be Janine.
Hi, this is Janine. I am a resource teacher on the digital design team, helping out with computer science and distance learning. And I'm going to turn off my video now so I don't cut out. Bye. I'm going to turn it over to Mickey.
Hi, everybody. My name is Miki Kamimura, also with the Office of Curriculum and Instructional Design, and we are happy to have all of you folks here today. I'm going to pass it over to our other team member, Brett Tanaka.
Mickey. Aloha, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our excellence module on implementing computer science teacher standards during distance blended learning. Before we get started, just making sure everyone has the slide link. I think it's posted. Okay. Sorry, next slide. So for our desired outcomes for today, we will start off with an overview of the standards for computer science teachers, which we will be aligning to the strategies and resources for teaching computer science in a distance blended learning classroom. Next slide. Before we get started, let's take a moment and consider some words, concepts that come to mind when you think about what is involved with teaching computer science and distance blended learning. We'll take a moment, enter them in the chat. Any words, concepts related to computer science and distance learning. Great, coding. Any other words? Digital citizenship. Great. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, definitely. Safety. So, as shown in the word cloud examples for computer science and distance learning, there's a wide range of teaching concepts and practices that involve both computer science and distance learning. See if you can find any words that I mentioned in both examples and post them in the chat. Okay. Yep, digital. So let's start. There's a couple of them. So the first one is technology. The next one is computer. The next one is internet. And the last one is digital. Great. So next slide. So before we take a closer look at the connection, let's take a look at some common myths and misconceptions about learning or teaching computer science.
What do you think about when you hear the words computer science? Computers? Coding? Programming? It's this and much more. Let's examine 5 myths and misconceptions that arise when we talk about computer science. Number 1. Computer science is for males, hackers, or high achievers in math. False. Computer science is for all. You don't have to be a math whiz to be successful in computer science. We need to start early and tell students that it's good to take on new challenges and that they can succeed in computer science. Number 2. Computer science is all about coding. False. Coding, better known as programming, is just one part of the 5 core concepts from the K-12 computer science framework. Some branches within computer science require more problem-solving skills rather than just coding skills. You do not have to be a programmer to do hardware repair and maintenance. Number 3. Computer science is a special class that cannot be integrated into other subject areas. False. Hawaii recently adopted computer science standards that support the integration of computer science into a variety of core subjects. You're already doing some of this. For example, solving a problem by breaking down tasks. Students could break down the steps needed to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, to brush their teeth, or even draw a shape. Computer science influences every aspect of our lives. Let's help our students make those connections. Number 4. Computer science requires spending endless hours hunched over a computer and does not require creativity or teamwork. False. Collaboration and innovation are key elements in programming creative solutions to solve real-world community issues. And finally, misconception number 5. I need computers or electronic devices to teach computer science. False. You do not need a computer or electronic device to teach computer science. Unplugged computer science activities are readily available and allow students to learn concepts without devices. These are the 5 top myths and misconceptions. Computer science is about thinking innovatively to develop new solutions. Let's dispel the myths and misconceptions surrounding computer science to create diverse perspectives and solutions that are responsive to the needs of the world in the 21st century and beyond.
To help address some of these myths and misconceptions, there are 5 standards for computer science teachers around effective and equitable computer science instruction. Next slide. The purpose of these standards are to explain what computer science teachers should know and provide aspirational goals to guide their professional learning. And the standards are for computer science professional development providers to align their learning opportunities and resources for computer science teachers. For today's session, we will be focusing on the 5 standards for computer science teachers and briefly cover the indicators for each standard. Let's start off with Standard 1, which is Computer Science Knowledge and Skills, that focuses on the computer science content and practices that are aligned to the K-12 Computer Science Framework Standard. As a refresher, here are the 5 core concepts from the K-12 Computer Science Standards for students that we covered in our Excellence module presentation yesterday. For distance blended learning classrooms, there are opportunities for students to learn about computer science concepts such as computing systems using resources that are already being utilized. For example, students can use the existing hardware and software resources to learn how to use them, as well as basic troubleshooting steps when they stop working properly. Next slide. In addition to teaching basic computer science concepts, computer science teachers are also encouraged to focus on creating inclusive learning opportunities for students. Here are some inclusive computer science strategies to explore. For gender-focused computer science learning resources, there are programs such as Girls to Code and Sky Girls Connect that focus on closing the gender gap and engage girls in computer science. For ethnic-focused computer science learning, Purple Maya focuses teaching computer science to students using ancestral knowledge and cultural Hawaiian practices. For accessible computer science learning, the Access CS for All site focuses on increasing the successful participation of students with disabilities in K-12 computer science education. There are resources and videos for a variety of disabilities, including but not limited to visually impaired, hearing impaired, reading-related disabilities, etc. Another strategy for teaching the data and analysis concept in a distance blended learning classroom is using public or open data set to explore and analyze data online. Here's a list of different data sets: Google Trends, public data, Google Cloud public data sets, and the National Centers for Environmental Information. Next slide. For more advanced students, they can explore the Google Data Studio that provides free online data visualization tool that can be used to create interactive dashboards. Here's a link that walks students through the process of building Data Studio reports. Distance blended learning classroom can also be used to teach the impacts of computing by utilizing breakouts using Google Meet or threaded discussion in Google Classroom to collaborate and dialogue on a variety of computer science related topics. Here are a list of sample topics to explore and consider for your student dialogue groups and/or assignments. To help frame the prompts, each topic area has an article link that you can click on. So just click on the topic areas and it will link to an article just to help give you some ideas of what type of dialogue or prompts that a student can either discuss or in a Google Meet, or for a threaded discussion or a assignment. So this concludes the first standard for computer science teachers, and I will turn it over to Faith, who will go over standard 2, equity and inclusion.
Okay, thanks, Brett. Next slide. So why are equity and inclusion in computer science so important? Well, according to the K-12 computer science framework, computer science is more than a discipline for the few, but rather it is an essential 21st century literacy skill for all students. And in addition to that, the people creating the technology solutions should represent the population they are serving. So the purpose of equity in computer science is not to prepare all students to major in computer science, but to ensure that all students have the foundational knowledge they will need to allow them to productively participate in today's digital world. So, next slide. Although most Americans believe that computer science is as important to learn as reading, writing, and mathematics, and most parents want their child's school to offer computer science learning opportunities, there are stereotypes and misconceptions like the ones we saw in the opening video that kind of limit students' perception of themselves learning computer science. Next slide. So even females report that they are less likely to learn computer science, have less confidence in learning it, and believe that they are going into future careers where computer science is not required. So next slide. The recently released Hawaii State Computer Science Landscape Report reveals some advanced placement computer science student enrollment data where participating ethnicities do not reflect our actual population. So you can look at this list, and students who identify as Filipino make up 30%, while white students make up 22%. And you can read through the list and you'll notice that there are no Pacific Islander students. So next slide. So let's try this activity from code.org. So if your first name begins with A through M, click on the first link. If your first name begins with N through Z, click on the second link. And I'll give you a minute, or maybe a little less than a minute, to read the articles. And I'm going to ask you a few questions about them. Okay, that was speed reading. So maybe if you could put in the chat your response to these questions. So how many teeth do platypuses have in their bill? And how do mama platypus feed their young? And how do platypus walk? So those 3 questions. And you may be realizing that half of you learned more about giraffes, but the questions were all about platypus. So thank you for your participation. So maybe if you can share, how does it feel when the judgments about your aptitude are based on knowledge that you have not yet accumulated? Okay, so next slide. So we've looked at why it's important for all students to learn computer science. Now let's take a look at how we can support students so that they feel like they're welcomed and they can succeed. So for the really young, visual block-based programming languages allow them to learn the ideas that go into programming without the obstacles of syntax errors found in the traditional text-based languages. And for middle school students, we can teach computer science through the lens of other content areas. Like, for example, happening right now, they're teaching algebra concepts by programming video games through Bootstrap. And after-school programs like Girls Who Code provide a safe environment for girls to innovate and develop self-confidence. And also instructional strategies like verbal prompts can help struggling learners. Next slide. And how can we make our course advertising the courses more inviting? So one idea might be to revisit how we brand those course names or descriptions. And so, for example, if the course is Code to Learn or Learn to Code, rather than just something like that, maybe we could put a little descriptor and say Learn to Code to make a difference to a cause that you care about, or Learn to Code to create something that could change the world. And later, when you have a chance, maybe you could click on that link at the bottom for 9 tips for promoting equity in the classroom by code.org. So next slide. And how can we make our spaces, our classrooms, more inviting for computer science diverse learners? So by including art, nature, posters, including plants, which one of our special guests today does do all of these things, asking female students from last year to be student aides for this year so that the new students see someone they can relate to, and maybe even a personal invitation. If a teacher asks a female student to join the computer science class, it builds their self-confidence when they realize someone recognizes their potential. And having role models include that something, maybe posters of people in the tech industry from different ethnicities, genders, and age groups. And in the notes section of this slide, I put in a link to the CS Ed Week, and it has resources, lessons, and posters that you can select from. So now I'm going to turn it over to Brett to share the professional growth and identity.
Thank you, Faith. The next Standard 3, Professional Growth and Identity, focuses on continuous professional learning and participation or collaboration in a larger computer science education community. For all HIDOE teachers, for-credit and non-credit computer science-related courses and learning opportunities can be found on the PDE3 website. In addition, computer science Professional development courses are promoted through the Project Inspired program that offers online computer science related PD courses. Project Inspired courses are offered biannually during winter, spring, and summer fall sessions. Computer science related PD opportunities are also being posted on the HIDOE Continuity of Learning website's Professional Learning Opportunities calendar. Also, coming up next year, there will be a 2021 Hawaii Computer Science PD Summit that will start off with a pre-summit event on February 6th, followed by the summit kickoff event in May 2021. Information for the respective events will be posted shortly on the HIDOE sites mentioned. On the national level, there are a variety of computer science professional learning opportunities through organizations such as the Computer Science Teachers Association, the College Board, hold on here. The College Board AP Computer Science, the CS for All, and the International for Society for Technology and Society are all different organizations that offer computer science professional development. Next slide. For our local computer science professional learning communities, we are building a community of computer science teachers on the HIDOE Edmodo website. Here are the instructions to sign up and join different teacher community groups. Please note, it is recommended to use your HIDOE Gmail account so you can be verified as a HIDOE staff. Here are the different Edmodo groups to join the respective community group. So we have one for elementary, one for middle, one for high school, and one specifically for AP Computer Science principal teachers. In addition to the HIDOE Computer Science community, there are national and local computer science professional learning communities such as the Computer Science Teachers Association and the CSJ Hawaii chapter. There are also the International Society for Technology and Education and the local affiliate chapter, Hawaii Society for Technology and Education. And last, we have the CS for All Teachers and the College Board AP Teacher Community. These are all different options that you can join to be part of the community of computer science teachers. Next, Janine will be going over Standard 4 instructional design.
All right, so let's get started with instructional design. Here are the the indicators for Standard 4. There are 7 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure I count correctly. There are 7 of them. And, I think I mentioned this at the webinar yesterday that I'm attending ISTE's conference virtually for the first time. And every day I learn something new. So today, they did this little technique to make sure that people are paying attention and processing what's being, shown to them. So I would like you to look over the indicators for Standard 4 and choose the one that is the most challenging for you. Or, if you were going to implement computer science standards in your classroom, which one would be the most challenging for you? And which one would be the easiest for you to implement? And so I will give you a sample. So for me, I think A would be the easiest. So I'm going to type A in the chat and I'm going to put a slash and the most challenging, sorry, I get this mixed up. The most challenging for me would be the personal meaning to students. So that would be E. And the easiest one for me would be A, analyzing the curriculum. So I'm going to hit return, and there we go. There are my answers in the chat. So E would be the most challenging for me, and A, I think, would be the easiest because I can look through curriculum and I can analyze. But I'm not the expert. I will have somebody from the classroom give you her perspective. So I'm just talking while you're processing. And so Christy says, thank you, Christy. She says, most challenging G, easiest E. Yep. Okay. And Sarah says G and A. Yeah, I did the opposite too. Sorry. I wanted to end with something positive. So start with the most challenging and then end with what you think is the easiest. I always like to end on a positive note. Okay. So Sarah says G and A, Dr. Ida, C and E, Trisha, E and E, Charles. Okay, so thank you for your input. It doesn't really matter what you put. It was more just for you to process and read through these standards. So let's go to the next slide. So you did that, right? Okay, thank you for participating. Next slide. So what I did was I took those indicators and I put them into clusters because I thought some of these go together better than others. So A, B, and C I thought kind of went together, and I have a special guest here. I have a classroom teacher, an excellent classroom teacher, Sarah Romfo from Kailua Intermediate School. So she will introduce herself and give you more information on what she teaches, and she will share some of her teacher tricks and tips while teaching computer science. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So like Janine said, I'm a teacher at Intermediate School. I'm the media teacher here. So I'm not exactly teaching a computer science course, but I have piloted some of these curriculums, some of these online resources, especially since we're in distance learning. I've been trying all kinds of online things, and some of them have been computer science related. So I'm just here to share what has worked for me, some kind of tips and sites and things that I've used that I've found helpful. So next slide, please. So this is kind of the main things that I've looked at, or I'm gonna show you a little bit more about. A lot of these sites are working well with the students' Google accounts. So if your students have switched to what we're calling the state Gmail, the one that's like their student number, they can log into a lot of things without you having to do anything to set them up or whitelisted or green lighted or any of that stuff. Like they just work. Code.org just works with student DOE accounts. So does Tinkercad. Those are two that I used this quarter. The other ones in the middle, the Google CS First, I used last year. And then down at the bottom, Khan Academy and Swift Playgrounds, I used those last year. They were all useful in kind of different ways. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what I've done on code.org and Tinkercad, because those are what I've done real recently. These are all like for kind of just units really on block coding is what I've done with them. But some of them have even more depth or information, like a fuller course. So let's take a look at the next slide. So here at the left, this is just a screenshot from code.org. If you haven't been to code.org much, it's a huge site with many, many extra projects. This is a screenshot of the extra things. So you can go on it for like kind of standalone, shorter little projects. Like there's some specifically made for Hour of Code. There's these ones that I screenshotted that are just different projects. And then they also have more lengthy courses. So there's a CS Fundamentals course that says this for elementary. I teach grades 7 and 8, and we just kind of jumped in. We did a standalone lesson from this fundamentals course, and it worked well for grade 7 and 8. Let's go to the next slide. So from this CS Fundamentals course, down in that colored bar at the bottom left, you can see that like course D, it says is made for 3rd grade. But I tried a standalone lesson from it with my 7th and 8th graders, and they were plenty challenged. So if you teach higher grades, don't let it turn you off that like, oh, this is for 3rd grade or this is for elementary, because it was plenty challenging. The other thing that I really liked in code.org was this view of these green and white circles that you're seeing. That's the teacher's view. And then all the blurry things at the far left, those are the student names. So it shows you in real time where your students are at with the different challenges and different parts of the lesson. So it's very easy to see their work. They don't have to turn anything in. Once they join your class, which is very similar to how Google Classroom operates, joining with a class code, or I think code.org was actually integrated with Google Classroom, that it kind of went in and just populated my classes for me almost. It was very, very easy, but very, very easy to see student work. So I liked that. Next slide. Another site that I'll just talk about a little bit today is this site called Tinkercad. 3D design is kind of their main thing. So a little different than the block coding that students were doing in the code.org lessons. They're making 3D designs like these 3 little samples. This is one student's dashboard that I screenshot. So they're being able to move things around and think in that kind of 3D mode, which is very new for them. Let's go to the next slide. So this is part of the login like dashboard for Tinkercad. 3D design is what I've done with it and what they, I believe, kind of got their start on. It's their main thing, but they do have something called Code Blocks, which has students create 3D designs basically using block coding from what I can figure out. So I haven't quite tried it yet, but it does have a block coding aspect to it, if that's interesting to you. Have to be an expert at teaching 3D design. I'm not. There is a tutorial that Tinkercad automatically walks the students through once they get logged in. They logged in with their student account, so it was very, very easy. And then once you set up your classes, very similar to code.org, you can just click on the student's name and you can see all their work and all of their different designs. So there's nothing that students have to export or turn in or do. It's very, very easy. Let's take a look at the next slide. So this is my last slide. One tip that I have is that we at our school asked for a generic student account so that when we have a site that we want to use or try, I open up an incognito window, I go to that site. I usually use a Chromebook, like what my students would have. I can put in that account and I can test out, is it going to be blocked? Is it going to work automatically or what? And then I can screenshot also to tell the students exactly what they need to click and what they need to do. So this was the screenshots that I used when we logged into Tinkercad. Like they don't click log in, they click sign up, and then they don't do students join your class, they do sign in with Google. So if you can get an account like that from the, I don't know who they are, the people that you put in a ticket with, then it's very, very useful that you can try out different sites. So those are some things that worked for me in 4A, looking at the curriculum.
Thank you, Sarah. She volunteered just a couple days ago. I asked her actually, and she was willing to give her insights. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I just wanted to point out that she also, here's our next slide. She also, she said, I don't really teach a computer science class, but she is making connections to other disciplines, right? The class that she's teaching right now. And she showed us a few examples of resources where students can plan projects that probably have meaning to them, personal meaning to them. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So the other thing I want to point out is that if you are looking for connections to other disciplines, you can click on the little bubbles. The first one, that kind of bright blue one, resources, computer science, that is for elementary grades. It's from Gilbert Public Schools. If you click on the one that says computer science instructional resources, that will show you this is for Arizona, Gilbert Public Schools, but are we like stuck? Oh, sorry, click on kindergarten. Pardon me. I thought I got stuck again, like my bandwidth was making things freeze. So if you scroll down, you can see, the standards, and they're not exactly the same as ours, but they're similar. And just things that you're already doing and connections that you can make to what you're already doing. Okay. So the other resource I wanted to share with you, click on that other bubble, is from Virginia. And click on the first link, and that will take you to their website. And so if you scroll down a little to resources right there, instructional resources, there's integration alignment, the second one, and that is a Word doc. So I loaded that into Google, and that would be the second link. So you can see integration, and it only goes up to grade 8, but you can see how you can make connections to ELA, math, science, social studies, etc. All right, so let's go back to our slides. I would like to also go to the next slide, which has another cluster, plan instruction to foster student understanding and inform instruction for assessment. So I would also like to have another teacher from Kalani High School. Next slide. Dr. Michael Ida. He is another excellent teacher from Kalani High School. And he gave us some really great resources at the webinar yesterday. And he couldn't make it yesterday, but he could make it today's session. So here he is to share his insights. And the next slide has his talking points. So I would like to turn it over to Dr. Ida, and he can introduce himself and give us his insights.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to be like a student, so I'm going to show you my face. I'm going to turn on my camera at the very beginning and then turn it off. And that's because I have kind of limited spotty bandwidth where I am, seems to be today. So I don't want to cut out in the middle, so I'll turn off that part of it. So thank you for having me. I teach at Kalani High School, as Janine said. Our CS program has been up and running for kind of losing track now, about 7 or 8 years, I believe. So we've had a couple of groups of students go through, and we've got everything from the intro class to the AP CSP and the AP CSA. So just real quick, everybody, just to dovetail on Sarah's presentation, another great resource that I found in addition to code.org is codehs.com. So all one word, codehs.com. And they have a lot of similar resources to code.org. They have everything from sort of mini courses to full year courses. It integrates well with Gmail, Google Classroom, and that's a real lifesaver in a lot of situations, especially when we first went on lockdown last year. It's kind of unexpected for everybody, and so we had to scramble and try to find things for kids. And one of the things I had my kids doing distance was CodeHS. So like code.org, it's got structured lessons. It's got videos, it's got exercises, so it's kind of a all-in-one package. The only downside to it is it's a freemium, so there's a free level where you get some basic stuff, but if you want all the good stuff, then you would need to go to the paid level. But I found that for me, the free level is good enough. I'm able to get by with the free level. So just to share another resource, that's one that I use quite a bit. So just real quick, just want to share with everybody some things from the high school point of view, and particularly when we think about what our experience has been going full distance learning. Now for CS, we're kind of fortunate in the sense that a lot of aspects of the subject sort of lend themselves to that full distance environment. So it's been great, but there's other, of course, lessons learned going full distance as opposed to being in person. So I guess one of the things that really has struck me, and in general, when we think about CS education, is we think about the pieces for instructional design. We want to have projects that speak to kids, their interests. You want to have interdisciplinary connections. You want to have assessment as kind of an integrated part of that piece. And for me, the real big revelation has been PBL, project-based learning. And that really lends itself well to computer science just because of the nature of the subject. I mean, that kids are on the internet all day, and you just look around on the internet and there's loads of ideas for things that you could have as a basis for a project. So for me, PBL is kind of the big revelation. And when we think about going into distance learning, how is that going to work, and how do you get kids to collaborate? Well, it's been a challenge. It's it's an ongoing learning process and an ongoing growing process. But I found that it's not impossible, even full distance, to have kids work on projects and to have some kind of collaborative piece built in. Of course, there's breakout rooms. So if people are we're using a G Suite, so we use Google Meets, and there's extensions that you can use that will allow you to do breakouts in those formats. So those are great options. Another thing that I found is one of the things, especially in the high school level, when you get kind of into the more specific aspects like coding and having kids collaborate, it's always one of the challenges was to find some kind of editor where kids can collaborate real time. Having kids collaborate on coding projects has always been a little bit of a struggle just because of the different editors and what they allow. So in the past it was kind of clunky where kids had to share this file, I'll give you this file, you give me it back. But I found there's one platform that I've been using a lot called REPL, and I think that's the one link in my slide is to that. And that's a platform that I found they have a really nice team feature where kids can actually collaborate real time on a program, so they can both be in the same editor space at the same time, and you can see each other, what the edits are. And so that's pretty neat. So, under the limitations of being distance, that's another thing that I found has been really helpful. But just in general, PBL for me would be something that, I would really encourage people who go into CS teaching to really start from the beginning and incorporate that. Because for me, I come from a math teacher background. So when I first started teaching CS, I kind of approached it like how I would teach math, which actually doesn't quite fit. I mean, you think of the two subjects as being similar, but the way that you teach them is actually quite a bit different. And that for me has been a revelation. So I would heavily encourage people to look at PBL, even distance learning. There's still options for collaboration. And of course, there's also, you can adjust the project so that kids can work on it individually. And that's also an option as well. So even given the limitations that we have, there's still plenty of things to do to engage kids. So mindful of the time, I'll pass it back to Janine. And
all right, thank you so much for your classroom teacher insights. And I just recall that you also you did some eSchool classes, right, online? So
yeah, I do actually teach eSchool.
So
EPCSA.
Dr. Ida, I like to call him that. He has a wealth of experience, and I thank him for sharing his insights. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Faith now for the last standard. Okay, Faith, take it away.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thanks, Janine. I forgot that I had both buttons to hit. So my section is going to be on classroom practices. So next slide. In this past September, Whitney Aragaki, a biology and computer science teacher from Waiakea High School, and Garrett Hatakenaka, a computer science teacher from Kaiser High School, co-taught from their different islands for the HIDOE Learning Lab. They offered 2 sessions, 1 hour in length for 8 days for up to 50 students in grades 9 through 12 from across the islands. So their class was titled Sweet Sweets, and the students learned apps in Google Suite through cooking activities. So next slide. And they shared about their experience in a recent peer-to-peer power session. And I attended that session and I enjoyed it so much that I reached out to them and asked them for permission to share some of their you know, what they learned, lessons learned, and best practices for this session today. So this is what I wanted to share, that what they found was cultivating positive classroom climate was really important. In addition, promoting student efficacy, supporting student collaboration, and encouraging student communication. And these were all elements or criteria that you will find in the computer science teacher standards. And it just dovetailed so nicely with what they were doing. So next slide. So I'll go over some of the models that they used and how they used them. So one of it, one was one teacher, one teach, one observe, and one teach, one assist. They kind of piggyback the two together. And that worked really well for them, where one teacher is delivering the instruction or a demonstration, while the second teacher is moderating the chat, monitoring the chat, checking the volume, checking the location on the screen, and checking for understanding. So for example, Whitney would be delivering the lesson, and Garrett would be thinking out loud, wondering, asking questions that the students had, kind of elevating the students in the chat. And this teamwork ensured that all the students' voices were heard and that all the students understood the activity. The next was parallel teaching. In this case, this could be a co-teacher or elevating a student to be that co-teacher. So for elementary schools, it might be the classroom helper who is going to be the teacher aide and help to monitor the chat and make sure that the teacher is aware of all the questions so that she is able to repeat or cover again any of the points that needs to be covered. But for Whitney and Garrett, this parallel teaching involved splitting their class, that large group, into two separate breakouts, and where one teacher would differentiate the content to a higher or more in-depth level, while the other teacher could focus on different content or the same content in a different way. Then alternative teaching, where the teacher sections off a small group to review the material in a different way or work on different parts of the same lesson. So for example, Garrett would be teaching a hamburger lesson, and Whitney would have private chats with students as they work to compile all their recipes into a recipe book. And WebEx allows for those kinds of private chats to occur. And finally, team teaching. They found that team teaching, where two teachers are teaching at the same time, didn't really work well for this particular situation because the computer can only focus on one teacher at a time. So that's a consideration when you consider which of these models you might try. So the next slide. And then they shared a little bit about what they got from WebEx and Google Meet. So those are the two platforms that are authorized for HIDLE. And you can use Zoom if there are only adults on the session. But for WebEx, they found that it's really nice for large groups because there's better crowd control features, like you can mute everybody, or there's those options for private chats that Whitney was having. But for breakouts, they found Google Meet works a little bit better. It's designed more for social interaction. It's good for the students to work with each other. Anyone can share their screen or share the video of themselves. Students can mute and unmute themselves, and they can even select closed captioning if they find that to be a helpful aid to them. So they don't need the teacher to be in the room to control all of these features while they're collaborating. And students can interact much like they would have had it been a face-to-face classroom environment. So next slide. So Whitney and Garrett know that students need to be able to talk to their peers. And in the beginning, they found that students were not talking to each other in the breakout sessions, and they realized it's probably because the age range, there were students from grades 9 to 12, and also probably because they didn't know each other. They came from all different islands. And so they put their heads together and they really tried to figure out how can they make it more inviting for the students to participate in the breakout sessions. Because if you think about it, like last school year, when we went into online learning, it was March and the students already knew each other. So it was kind of not, it was easier for them to collaborate. And then this year, after summer, when we went into online learning, it might have been classmates that they didn't know. And so that's a similar kinds of challenges that Whitney and Garrett were facing. So Whitney wrote a paper about this whole experience, and in it she put that they realized the students feel more comfortable in environments where their perspectives were an integral part of the protocol and experiences, where they can invest themselves in opportunities that acknowledge their emotions and environments that vary day to day. So after all their brainstorming, they decided to design the 5 breakouts based on student dispositions. And so here's their little chart that shows what the different rooms were. Room 1 was camera on, audio on, and I'm ready to engage. Room 2, camera off, audio on, and I'm ready to engage. And it might have been there were things happening in the background that didn't want to show necessarily, and they wanted to recognize that. Room 3 was camera off, audio off, chat box only, and ready to engage. And this was, maybe they had a younger sibling, or maybe Auntie was kind of loud in the kitchen, or whatever the situation is, they wanted to honor it. Room 4 was camera off, audio off, and we'll try to chat and get comfortable. And there was a teacher present in this room to kind of facilitate that. And then the last room was, I need one-to-one tech assist. So again, there was a teacher in this room to assist with them. And okay, next slide. So I took some clips, or Mickey helped me to section off little pieces so we don't have to watch the whole thing. But this first clip is going to be some effective classroom management for the breakout. So I'll ask Mickey to play the first link.
Something that really worked well for breakout groups that I did after that through this school year is that I trust kids to be on their own. And this is something that might be really helpful for upper L and middle school, but I trusted kids to be on their own. And sometimes they just needed a place to talk. I wanted to ensure their privacy and their space from me. So what I did was I turned on closed captionings on my end. So I'm able to kind of like, but I muted it. I couldn't necessarily hear all their talking because there's a lot of talking at once, but turning on their closed captionings was a way for me to monitor what was being said and that there was a level of appropriateness that was happening. Something that Google does when they're doing closed captioning is that if there is a swear word coming out, it will be like a line of asterisks or a set of asterisks, so that it was an easy indicator visually for me to say, oh, there's something interesting in the chat. Maybe I'm going to go and unmute that to check in on this group.
Oh, thank you, Mickey. And there's one more clip where Whitney shares how they used Chromebooks to facilitate their breakout sessions. So we can play that one.
But I wanted to share a pretty basic, opportunity to use the Chromebooks that are just sitting around in our classrooms. So something that I thought of while I was just having insomnia one night was, how can I better and more easily make breakout groups with using the technology already in my classroom and not overloading my screen. So once I ran a breakout session on my own with like multiple tabs, and then my computer felt like it was going to explode. And no one wants a gender reveal explosion anywhere anytime soon. So I'm definitely not a fan of using a lot of extensions, but I'm a fan of being as practical as possible. So this is what I have. And this is what we're going to practice today too, which is really great, is that I have my Google Meet set up
on Chromebooks right here waiting for me. And so when I ask you to go into breakout groups today, they will be on my individual Chromebooks. Because you can sign into multiple Chromebooks, you can sign into multiple Meet sessions at the same time on different devices. This is a great way to use the Chromebooks and to not have them overload. One of the great things also about it is that you don't have to mute everyone to hear what's going on, right? That it can just happen, and it'll feel like the classroom experience. You'll hear the chatter. When you unmute yourself to talk to one group, they'll hear the chatter in the background of other groups. Sometimes that helps them and motivates them to work harder. And so then you just mute yourself again, but then the screen is on so that students can see you walking around the classroom, and that when you're there, they can interact with you. And when you walk away, they know that you're in the classroom still, or they're still in the classroom, but that you're helping another group at the time. So it really simulates the classroom experience.
Thank you, Mickey. It's so nice to hear from the teacher. So next slide, please. So for more great ideas on effective classroom practices, please visit this peer-to-peer website linked here, where Kristen Brummel, educational specialist, Hawaii State Teacher Fellows Program, coordinates, curates, and manages the sessions born from the belief that teachers inspire teachers. Next slide. So here I put all of the links so you can watch Whitney's full recording. You can read the paper she wrote. You can learn more about their Sweet Sweets adventure, and click on P2P to register for the power sessions. Next slide. So the computer science teacher standards we covered in this session are designed to provide a clear guidance around effective and equitable computer science instruction, and to support rigorous computer science education for all K-12 students. So these standards were designed to explain what computer science teachers need to know and be able to do, and also kind of aspirational goals to help guide the professional development as they continuously develop from novice to master teacher. So that next slide. So thank you for attending this session and your participation. Please complete our session feedback form, and we really hope you enjoyed it and learned a few new things. Thank you. I'm going to end the recording.